Oh my goodness, I have so much to be grateful for. Just always so grateful to be in this role, to be your minister. So grateful for the opportunity to grow with you and because of you. And I mean that in such a loving way. Thank y'all. And that's what we do with one another, right? In community, we are here to grow with one another, and sometimes because one another, right? So thank you, Christy, for that message. That was so beautiful, so perfect. Yes. So perfect. And it ties in so beautifully with this idea of resilience, because that's definitely a way that we can be resilient, is just choose to see the good, right? And focus on the good. And thank you for this song. It will get better, right? Same thing. It'll get better. It always is. It already is. So this morning I'm continuing our series on the power of resilience, and it's based on a book by two psychologists, Robert Brooks and Sam Goldstein. And so grateful for Reverend Vita, who brought this to my attention and gave the sermon last week, which was so beautiful and so perfect. And honestly, I watched it and said, oh my gosh, I don't have anything left to say. She did it so perfectly and so beautifully. But honestly, just witnessing her, who she is, her practice, and just inspired me that much more to dig into this topic of resilience. So let me just review what this idea of resilience is and how they define it. Now, keeping in mind, they started with a book called Raising Resilient Children. That was the first book. And I'm thinking they realized, oh my gosh, these parents need more help. So that's why they decided to do the power of resilience, right? Because as you know, we cannot give to someone else what we don't have for ourselves. And so to raise resilient children, which all of us are in one way or another, right? We have to inhabit ourselves so that we can share that with others, resilience. So resilience, as you know, is the capacity to face stress, setbacks, and suffering without losing hope or purpose. It's this idea that we have the ability to persevere no matter the circumstances, no matter the challenges. That's resilience. And what I want to offer is how our unity principles are already tied into this idea of resilience. That's what those principles are, is when we continue to work those 5 principles. I mean, we do it through our lives, live into those principles and see how they fortify our spiritual foundation and show up exactly when we need them. And that idea is when we're practicing them, what we are indeed practicing is resilience. And so the third principle is the one I've been focusing on. And as y'all know, that third principle is the idea of that we create our reality through our minds. Right? We create our reality through our minds. Now, when I first came to Unity, it was this idea, oh, we always think positively. Just think positively. Just think positively. Anybody? I had that naive understanding. Oh, you're just always thinking positive. Just think positive. Just think positive. But guess what? That's one part, right? There's a deeper aspect to it. And the deeper aspect is I have to pay attention to whatever shows up. Everything, right? It all belongs. It's not that I'm not going to pay attention to it and think positively about it. So here's what happens with you when you do, and I shared this with y'all last week before last, was one of the things that they say to build resilience is that you have to look at your negative scripts. Remember I said that. Whatever that negative script is, it is driving your bus whether you know it or not. Yeah, so I shared with y'all that something that happened to me when I was really young, and it made me feel dismissed and ignored. And that has, I realized, really driven my bus. It's really driven my bus. Maybe that's why I'm on stage, right? I need to be heard. I need to be heard. Oh my goodness. So I was been able to reflect on that negative script and reflect on how much it drove my bus. It drove my bus, and it's amazing how once I saw that, how other areas of my life started to open up. it's just kind of like, wow, just coming into alignment with that. And what my point is that when you're living from that negative script, more than likely you're living from some kind of hurt, some kind of woundedness, some kind of pain. Would you not agree? And anytime you're in that hurt, that woundedness, that pain, you're living like a wounded animal, right? A wounded animal. I think about, we had this one kitty named Puck who accidentally, I know Tom's is like, why are you bringing up Puck? He broke, Puck was the sweetest, and I named him Puck because he was exactly the Shakespearean Puck of sweet and mischievous all at the same time in this little bundle of gray kitten that we got when we were in Iowa, and he broke his paw, right? And so he couldn't, Thomas had to hold him over the litter box so he could go to the bathroom. Because that's how Thomas is. And then he was in the bathtub. He had this cast, he'd get into the bathtub, right? Because that's where he felt safe and protected. The wounded animal. So think about that negative script. When it runs you, you're in self-protection mode. Think about that, self-protection mode. Think about me in that self-protection mode of I'm feeling dismissed and I'm feeling ignored. I'll speak louder. Some of y'all know that about me, right? Because I need to be heard, right? Think about that, and that doesn't serve me. So when I let go of that script, whatever that is, I'm able to create community with you. I'm able to hear you and be with you because I'm able to be with myself. Take a breath. That's big, right? Take a breath. So that is resilience, and that's what we're practicing. And we're learning to move beyond the self-protection, right? Learning to move beyond it, knowing that when we move beyond it, what we are inhabiting, what we're living in is a soft heart, an awakened heart, and a heart that's available, and an open mind. That's huge, right? An open mind. The idea that everything belongs, that everyone belongs, even those that we have a hard time with or we struggle with, right? It all belongs. So now we move on to one of the ways that we build resilience, and that's through empathy. And empathy is simply the willingness to be with somebody exactly as they are, where they are. And it's the willingness, even more, it even goes deeper than that. It's the willingness to walk in someone else's shoes. Wow, right? Walk into someone else's shoes. And it's this idea of like, why did they get to that? Oh, well, maybe if I walk in their shoes and know their life experiences, I will understand how they came to these conclusions or these ideas or these thoughts. But you do it lovingly, right? Just lovingly, without whatever judgment, criticism, whatever it is that shows up, right? Because it's easy for that, but it's just lovingly. So what I want to begin with is, before we can extend it to anyone else, we have to give it to ourselves. So this idea is, dear one, I'm here for you. How about you just hold that? Breathe that in. Dear one, I'm here for you. Breathe that in and just even feel, what does that feel like? Dear one, I'm here for you. And then one more time. Dear one, I'm here for you. How does that feel? Just calming, right? Dear one, I'm here for you. So I want to talk about empathy, this idea of just being present with love, through two stories, two people that exemplify empathy, which is the open mind and the soft heart. The first one is the Gospel of Luke, what Luke says in the parable of the Good Samaritan, what Jesus says, which I've talked about that before, but I want to talk about that and how it's an example of empathy. And the second is from Apple, the streaming, Apple. Do you know what I'm talking about? Apple TV. Thank you. Do y'all have Apple TV? Anybody? Anybody? You watch Ted Lasso? Okay. This isn't about Ted Lasso. Okay. I know. Your smiles are going. This is about a show called Truth Be Told. And it's by the wonderfully talented Octavia Spencer, the Oscar award winning. And it's such a great example of empathy, and it's so complicated. So that's what I want to share with you guys. So the first one, let me just tell you the story if you don't already know, and that is the Good Samaritan, and this idea of it's empathy crossing the road. That's what this is. So this story, this parable, is in Luke 10:25-37, and Jesus in the story tells of a man that's been beaten, stripped, and left half dead on the roadside. Y'all remember that story, right? A priest sees him and walks by. A Levite sees him and walks by. And then a Samaritan comes and he stops. He notices the wounded man, and he does more than that. He bandages his wounds. He lifts him onto his own animal. He takes him to an inn, and remember, he pays for his care. Y'all remember that, right? Now, to understand this, the deeper part of it, what you have to understand is that Jews and Samaritans have a very hostile relationship with one another. That's the piece, that's why this story matters, which means that there's unrest between them, there's religious difference, there's political difference. Do we see that anywhere in the world? So that if you put yourself in the story, which is what we always do in Unity, and it's how we read the Bible, we think, who am I in this story, right? So if I'm the Good Samaritan and I'm walking down the road, somebody is sitting there wounded, and that person thinks completely different than I think, votes completely different than I think, right? Has perhaps a just completely opposite than me. And maybe also I know that there's this hostility. That's what it is about putting the self in the story and then choosing to be present for that person, choosing to care for that person. That is what that looks like. So empathy is tested at the boundaries, right? It tests us at our own boundaries. It reminds me of the Hillsong, their song about take me to the edge of my faith. That's what empathy is. It takes you to the very edge and says, and can you practice it? Because it's always going to show up in our lives. Can you practice this? Does everyone belong in your world? Can you love everyone? Can you be present to everyone? Can you see life through their eyes? That's what empathy is. And again, it's caring for those who we think perhaps don't belong in our circle. That's big, right? Anyone who we have deemed doesn't belong in our circle. That's empathy. That's empathy. So it takes courage, right? It takes courage to cross the road and to do that. So what our authors would say is that empathy strengthens resilience. Why? It keeps the heart from hardening. A hardened heart may look strong, but it's brittle. A compassionate heart may ache, but it can bend without breaking. The Samaritan is resilient not because he avoids suffering, but because he responds to suffering with care and concern. Amen. That's big, right? Whew. Just keep breathing that in. Okay, so the second one I want to give you is, again, from a show, Truth Be Told. I watched season 1. I was just so taken by it. And so it centers on a journalist and a podcaster. Her name is Poppy Parnell, the funny name. And she reopens this case that made her famous. It was like the case that put her on the map as a podcaster. And it's the conviction of Warren Cave for a murder. And she basically is like, her podcast was so popular that it actually helped that this young man be put into into jail and prison for life for the murder of a neighbor. And she absolutely believes this is true. And then she comes to a point in her life, and that's where it opens, where she thinks, wait a minute, maybe that's not the case. Maybe he really did not. He was a young 18, tried obviously as an adult, in prison for, I don't know, I think at this point he's in his 40s, so that's a long time, 20 years. And she begins to question and think, I don't think he did it. So she decides, so the part about empathy, right, is just deciding, I'm going to look over this again. I'm really going to go see this. So she goes to visit him and tries to have a relationship with him. And of course, he's like, yeah, right, what did you do to me? And she's like, yeah, I'm thinking this over again. So, yeah, really. And he's clearly angry. Now, the piece you have to really keep in mind, he's white, she's black. That's a central piece of this. He takes off his shirt. Anybody seen the show, by the way? Okay. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. So he has this long shirt on, and he takes it off, and all tattooed are swastikas. And he shows them to her in a very menacing kind of way. So she looks at him, and she shrinks, and she thinks, wait, no, maybe this wasn't a good idea, right? She shrinks. Then she goes back home and still hears, no, I really, because there's images of him as a young person, and she's really thinking this over and feeling like, no, I made a mistake. And it turns out he's an AB. Do y'all know what an AB is? Aryan brother. I had to look that up too. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant. Aryan brother, right? And her family finds out, and they're like, what are you doing? How in the world can you go and turn this over? He's an Aryan brother. Don't you dare let our father know. But there's something in her that says, but I made a mistake, right? I don't think he did this. But here's the other thing that happens is this idea of he's not really an Aryan brother. There's a reason why he's presenting this way, right? It's for survival. That's not really the truth of him, right? She's able to see the God in him. That's not his essence. That's just what he's doing for survival. That's a huge piece. So she goes back to see him, and when she does, she's in her strength, she's in her resolute. She knows this is the right thing to do. And she goes back to see him and says, this is going to change. I know I made a mistake. I'm going to make this better. And so it's a beautiful piece of seeing how what she also realizes is their shared humanity. And their shared humanity is the idea that as a young person, he was stuck in prison. He didn't have family to raise him. He didn't have a mother's love. And that's what they had in common. Her mother died at a really young age. And she was able to be empathetic and say, we are the same. We both have struggled in our lives. And it's a beautiful outcome. So, yeah, just a beautiful example of empathy. And I like to think that what she said, and they're very clear about showing she's a woman of faith, the family's Catholic, you always see her praying, is how do I honor the image of God in this person, right? How do I honor the image of God in this person? That's what we do when we practice empathy. How can we honor the essence of each of us? Because the story is just a story, right? The essence is the truth. So some practices, practical steps, like Christy had mentioned, paying attention, right? Empathy begins with attention. Before the Samaritan helped, he noticed. Opportunities like this are not hidden from us. They are simply crowded out because I tend to live life in a hurry. Has anyone around you been left on the roadside? Grief, shame, illness, loneliness, addiction, unemployment, disappointment? Have you noticed anyone carrying a burden that does not show on the outside? Empathy starts when we refuse to rush past what the divine has placed in front of us. It's a practice of attention. It requires our humility. It says, I may not know the whole story. It heals, our humility heals relationships, strengthens community, transforms the world. It changes the way we speak in conflict. It changes the way we respond to people who have failed. It changes the way we think about strangers, right? We think about them. We can say there's more to them than that. There's more to them than what they're presenting. And it changes the way we use our own voice. Think about me and the negative and the script that was running. I'm dismissed. I'm ignored, right? It'll change how I speak, because then I won't speak from that place, right? That lack and limitation sort of place. We understand how powerful our words are. And sometimes it costs the comfort of staying uninvolved, but that cost is where our spiritual maturity grows, right? I would imagine from that act, the Samaritan grew. Anytime we step in and we help, we grow as well. So last, when I think about the Good Samaritan and I think about the wounded, all of us have that piece of us, right? We're all that wounded traveler in our human place, right? But then in divine, there's always a perfection, because we are the image and the likeness of the one. But in that human journey, we're all that wounded traveler. And so I feel like one of the best ways we can look at one another, and those, again, who don't think like us, don't whatever like us, that we have a hard time embracing, we can also say, you're like me, right? You are probably also a wounded traveler in some ways, and that can help us extend empathy. So I'd like to end calling upon my Catholic upbringing. One of the things I loved about Mass was call and responses. So I'm going to read, and then I'm just going to ask you to respond, and I'll give you what the words are. So hopefully these words fill you in a way that they have me. This morning I have eyes that truly see another, a soft heart that knows divine love, and an open mind that aligns with divine intelligence and wisdom. And together, I'm asking you to say after me, I am resilient.
I am resilient.
This morning, I rewrite the fearful, angry, and judgmental scripts that I have repeated for too long. I cross the road toward people in pain. I speak about others with greater care, and affirm, I am resilient.
I am resilient.
This morning, we are committed to being the spiritual community where wounded people are not ignored, investigated from a distance, or reduced to labels, but are met with truth, dignity, compassion, and hope. And our affirmation is, we are resilient.
We are resilient.
This morning, we are people of empathy and courage. We guard ourselves from hardness of heart, careless words, and quick judgments. We are resilient in love, wise in truth, and faithful in service. The affirmation is, we are resilient.
We are resilient.
This morning, we see those who are wounded. We listen with compassion and respond with grace. As always, we are divine mercy in a world that needs our open minds and our soft hearts. Amen. And so it is.